You walk into the kitchen after a long day. Your teenager is standing right there. You ask how their day was, and what comes back is a shrug, a mumbled fine, or the kind of sigh that fills the whole room while saying absolutely nothing. You've been here before. You've asked the same questions, offered the same advice, and watched the same wall go up. And every time it happens, it stings a little more, because it feels personal. But here's what you need to hear. Your teen is not ignoring you because they stopped caring. They're ignoring you because the way you're trying to connect is colliding with how their brain is literally wired right now. And once you understand that collision, you can stop crashing into it and start stepping around it. So let's start with what's actually happening inside their head, because this part will change how you see the silence completely. The adolescent brain is not a smaller version of an adult brain. It's a construction zone. Decades of neuroscience research have mapped this development, and the pattern is consistent across every culture studied. The amygdala, the brain's emotional processing center, is fully online by adolescence. It fires fast, reads social situations as potential threats, and constantly pushes toward independence and peer belonging. But the prefrontal cortex, the region that handles impulse control, rational thinking, and filtering emotional noise, that doesn't finish developing until the mid-20s. That gap is not a character flaw. It is biology. Here's what that gap means in real time. When you walk in with a well-meaning question or an offhand critique, your teen's brain runs it through that emotional alarm system before logic ever gets a look in. They don't hear your concern. They hear pressure. And pressure triggers shutdown, not attitude, not defiance. Shutdown. A 2021 study published in Developmental Cognitive Neuroscience found that adolescents show significantly higher amygdala reactivity to perceived social evaluation than adults do, meaning even neutral comments from a parent can register as criticism. You're not fighting bad character. You're fighting a developmental timeline that nobody voted for. But here's the thing, biology is only half the problem. The other half is translation, and this is where most parents are unknowingly making things worse every single day. Think about how adults typically talk to teenagers. We lead with questions that feel like interrogations. We give advice before they've asked for it. We correct behavior as it's happening. From a parent's perspective, this is efficiency. From a teenager's perspective, it is a broadcast they never subscribed to. Developmental psychologist Erik Erikson identified adolescence as the critical stage of identity formation, the period when young people are actively building a sense of who they are, separate from their parents. That process is not optional, and it is not a phase. Every unsolicited opinion lands as a boundary being crossed. Every "have you thought about?" sounds like you're doing it wrong. This is also why teens communicate better in motion than across a table. Research consistently shows that adolescents open up more during side-by-side activities, driving, washing dishes, walking, than during face-to-face conversations. Direct eye contact, under conditions of social anxiety and heightened self-consciousness, is overwhelming for the teenage brain. When you sit them down for a formal talk, you're triggering performance anxiety before anyone says a word. The core mismatch is this: parents want clarity and closure. Teens want autonomy and space. When those two goals collide without a bridge, the teen pulls the drawbridge up. And most parents respond by trying harder to cross it, which only makes it rise higher. Now here's where it gets really interesting, because there's a psychological principle that explains teenage defiance better than any lecture ever could, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. It's called reactance theory, first proposed by social psychologist Jack Brem. The principle is simple: when people feel their freedom is being restricted, they instinctively push back to reclaim it, regardless of whether the restriction is reasonable. This is exactly why the third reminder about homework produces more resistance than the first. This is why hovering over their schedule makes them less likely to follow it. When compliance feels like surrendering control, the brain chooses defiance every time. The fix is counterintuitive, but it is thoroughly backed by research. You have to stop being the reminder and start being the consultant. Consultants don't chase. They wait for the invitation. Instead of asking, "Did you finish your project?" you say, "I'm ordering dinner in an hour. Let me know if you need anything before your study block." Instead of demanding a clean room, you say, "I need the laundry basket by Thursday so I can run the washer. What day works for you?" You are still holding the standard. You are just handing them the steering wheel on the details. A 2019 study in the Journal of Adolescence found that teens who felt a greater sense of autonomy within their family relationships reported lower levels of conflict and higher willingness to seek parental guidance. Trust them with small decisions, and they stop scanning for control and start scanning for connection. And speaking of connection, before we get into the exact shifts that work on a regular Tuesday evening, I want you to think about your own house right now. You know that one phrase, that one question, that instantly guarantees a rolled eye or a slammed door. Drop it in the comments below. Tell me exactly what you say that shuts your teen down every time. I read every single one, and we are going to use those real examples to keep building better approaches together. So let's talk about what this actually looks like in practice, because none of it requires a perfect script. It just requires a different approach applied consistently on regular, imperfect evenings. Start with how you ask questions. Replace "how was school" with "what was the most annoying thing that happened today?" Teenagers bond over shared frustration far faster than over forced positivity. Inviting honesty over performance gives them permission to be real, and real is exactly where the real conversation begins. Next, and this one is harder than it sounds, master the pause. When your teen says something, even just a complaint, resist the urge to respond immediately. Count 3 seconds. Let the silence sit. That small gap signals that you are processing what they said, not loading your rebuttal. It tells their brain this is a safe space, not a debate stage. Then, after that pause, reflect what you heard before you add anything else. It sounds like you felt completely blindsided by that. Lands in a completely different place than you should have told the teacher right away. Reflection disarms defensiveness. Advice offered before someone feels heard only reignites it. You can always circle back to guidance later, but only after they feel genuinely seen in the moment. Another shift that works is what I call time-bound availability. Teens rarely ask for deep conversations on your schedule. They hint at theirs, a lingering sigh, a stray comment about something they saw, a slow exit from the room. When you catch one of those moments, don't launch a full discussion. Just say, "I'm free for an hour if you want to run something by me." Give them the exit ramp. Remove the pressure. And because you removed it, they are far more likely to actually walk through the door. And then there's this one, which might be the most important shift of all: separate behavior from identity. Leaving the dishes out throws off the whole kitchen schedule, hits completely differently than "you are so irresponsible." One names a fixable action. The other attacks who they are. Research on adolescent self-concept development shows that teens who feel their identity is frequently criticized by parents are significantly more likely to disengage from family communication altogether. Critique the choice, not the character, and you keep the relationship intact while still holding the line. Now, if you're hearing all of this and thinking this sounds like permissive parenting, it is not. None of these shifts mean you lower your expectations or stop guiding. They mean you stop using force to create cooperation and start using alignment instead. Alignment sounds like, "I know this is frustrating. I also need it done. What would make that easier?" Force sounds like, "because I said so." One builds resentment. The other builds a bridge. Here's what you also need to accept going in: you will not see results in a week. Trust between parents and teenagers is not a switch you flip. It's a thermostat that warms up slowly and cools just as fast if you slip back into old patterns. There will be nights when you are tired and you fall back into interrogation mode. The wall will go back up. That is not failure. What matters is the trend line. Are you talking less and listening more? Are you offering choices instead of commands? Are you catching the small openings instead of waiting for the big breakthroughs? Research on parent-teen attachment published in Child Development consistently finds that adolescents who feel emotionally safe at home are the ones who return to their parents when things go seriously wrong, not because they were forced to, but because they know they will be met with calm instead of chaos. You are building a reputation inside your own house. Every time you choose curiosity over correction, you deposit into that trust account. And when the account is full enough, something shifts. The silence starts to break. Not because you demanded it, but because you made space for something better. You get the random text on a Wednesday afternoon. You get the drive home where they actually tell you things. You get the quiet thanks for listening that you would have completely missed if you had been too busy talking. The goal was never to win the argument. The goal was to keep the door open long enough for them to walk through it on their own terms. So the next time your teen gives you that familiar silence, don't take it as a verdict. Take it as a signal. Their brain is still wiring itself. Their identity is still forming. Their trust is still being tested. Stop interrogating. Start inviting. Give them space to miss you. Give them reasons to stay. And watch how quickly the wall becomes a window.